Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And the ruins of Boston we get to explore in Fallout 4 are anything but a peaceful place. A radiation-ridden wasteland populated by disgusting mutants, devious raiders, and dirty settlers. The world of Fallout 4 is certainly not for the faint of heart. During your time here, though, the choices made by the sole survivor will shape dozens of stories, and influence the very fate of this ash-covered Commonwealth. Yes, the player is given the ability to personally mold many of the game's quests and interactions. And while most of the decisions left up to us carry some degree of moral haziness or ambiguity, there's a handful of times we're allowed to behave as absolute monsters with the power we're given. So today we'll be taking a look at 5 more of the most evil things we're able to get away with in Fallout 4. Today's video begins, ironically enough, not in the Commonwealth proper, but instead on the arid outskirts of the Nuka World amusement park. Here, just east of the Grandchester Mystery Mansion, we can stumble upon an interesting faction of characters, known as the Hubologists, and their small camp. We learn that the Hubologists here are a cult-like group, practicing an unfamiliar religion that idealizes space and escape from the planes of Earth. They tell us that they're just a small subchapter of a much larger Church of Hubology that exists in force on the West Coast, where their religion is a bit more popular. And indeed, they're not lying. Players of Fallout 2 may remember the Hubologists as playing a small role in the game, operating from their headquarters near San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. You probably get the idea though. Just think of the Hubologists as a less renowned version of the Children of Adam, but instead of radiation, they obsess over space and stuff. Anyway, the reason this group of Hubologists is all the way out here just outside of Nuka World is because they believe that there's a broken UFO nearby, and they've been trying to fix it up. They haven't been having a whole lot of luck though, so they'll ask the sole survivor for aid. Of course, as it turns out, the broken UFO is really just an old amusement park ride, but good luck telling them that. Long story short, after completing some odd rituals, we'll have to gather 3 fusion cores and load them into the broken ride's battery pack in order to get it to function again. Once we've done that, the Hubologists will go inside and ask us to come with them and power on the controls. Do that, the ride turns on, the Hubologists spin around for a little while, and when the ride turns off, they'll simply walk out. All apparently believing they briefly went to space and freed their souls or something, before coming back to Earth. Again, they're weird, but they'll be happy, and you'll be rewarded with some ammo and a unique weapon. So, that's the end of that. But, if you're not quite satisfied with that conclusion, and are feeling a bit sinister, then I'm pleased to report there's an alternative way to complete this mission. You see, when we go to load those 3 fusion cores into the UFO Attractions battery pack, we don't actually have to only load in 3. We can put in 4 if we want to, though we're cautioned against it. But if we do that anyway, and load the ride with 4 and not 3 fusion cores, when the Hubologists all board on and we turn the ride on, rather than just spin around for a few seconds, they'll just keep spinning and spinning and spinning as the machine accelerates out of control. Ultimately, before long, they'll start begging for you to turn it off. Don't, and after just a few more seconds, their bodies will all explode under pressure, before the machine eventually overheats and cools down. Once it does, you'll be able to get off, all alone, and the quest will still be completed. So really, at the end of the day, there's no unique advantages or disadvantages to doing this in regards to material items or quest completion. We still finish the mission, we still get the same rewards. The only difference here is the morality behind it all. Next on our list, the Silver Shroud side quest line probably isn't what most players think of when they imagine an evil playthrough of Fallout 4. But hear me out. Kent Connolly, a ghoul and good neighbor, who happens to be a massive fan of pre-war superheroes and comics, believes that the solution to crime in the Commonwealth is to resurrect some of his favorite super characters, and have them bring justice to the Wasteland. He'll have the player don the outfit of the Silver Shroud, a fictional vigilante-esque superhero that was popular back in the good old days, and send you on a number of quests to defeat various bad actors across the Wasteland, all while he acts as a sidekick, keeping you one step ahead of your enemies via radio. At the conclusion of this short questline, things take a turn for the worse though. A particularly nefarious raider by the name of Sinjin and his gang managed to capture Kent, and are holding him hostage at the abandoned hospital the raiders currently occupy. Evidently Sinjin's a pretty powerful dude, and your vigilante work has greatly upset his business. Now, he wants revenge. We'll have to storm the hospital, defeat the raiders, and save Kent just moments before he's executed in order to complete the quest and finish the Silver Shroud's questline. Kent will promise to be more careful, and everything ends spectacularly. However, while that's the way things usually and normally end up working out, evil players can take the conclusion of this story in a whole nother direction. You see, after Kent's been kidnapped by the raiders and you storm the compound, as you breach into the room where he's being held, the first thing you'll probably do is try and confront the raiders and their boss Sinjin, either firing on them or entering dialogue and arguing with them for a while. But if you instead immediately shoot Kent after entering the room he's inside, like nothing else, you just walk in and fire on him, something kind of hilarious will happen. All of the raiders except Sinjin will start freaking out. They can't believe you would just randomly kill your sidekick, and they'll start screaming about how you're crazier than their boss.
Jesus, he's crazier than Sinjin.
What the?
From here, the quest will go one of two ways. Either all of the raiders besides Sinjin will just run off in horror, and you'll still have to defeat him in battle, or you can pass a speech check and actually convince all the other thugs to turn on Sinjin and kill him for you.
Jesus, he's crazier than Sinjin.
What the? Turn against your master now, ne'er-do-wells, or face my rightful vengeance. What?
Just don't kill us. Jesus.
You're going down.
Either way though, now the quest, and indeed the entire Silver Shroud saga, will be over. Kent will be dead, and you'll probably be feeling a lot less superhero-y, but hey, at least you really did show those raiders who's boss. Before we get to our next spot, a quick word from today's sponsor. Me, again. Please leave a like or something if you enjoyed. Really helps with the algorithm. Anyway, moving forward. Coming in at number 3, there's a random encounter the player can happen upon involving two people. Two of the same people. Both named Art. One will be kneeling, pleading for his life, while the other will be holding the distressed man at gunpoint. When approached, both Arts will tell the player that the other is a synth who wants to kill and replace them. The man holding the weapon will tell the player that just a few minutes ago, he was enjoying his walk in the Wasteland, when he bumped into this fellow, who was clearly a synthetic clone of his. The two immediately attacked and wrestled one another, and he came out on top. Now he wants to kill the synth, who he's confident was trying to replace him. The dude being detained will say that's not true at all. He's the original Art, and he was ambushed by the guy who's holding him. He'll beg the player for help. I know, it's all really confusing. It will be up to the player to determine which of these two gentlemen is telling the truth, and either help the detainee escape and kill his captor, or do the opposite, and just let the man execute him, depending on who you believe. Now, a bit of a spoiler alert, the guy on his knees with his hands in the air, he's the synth. If we let him die, we'll find that he has a synth component in his inventory, and the other Art who's holding him doesn't. So, case closed. But players with really good charisma can actually find out who's telling the truth quite early before any blood is spilled. And malicious characters can use that information to do something particularly horrifying. Passing a red speech check with the detained Art will cause him to quietly whisper and reveal that, yeah, he's actually the synth. He got himself into a bit of a mess, and he needs you to take care of the guy holding him at gunpoint. Otherwise, the Institute will be mad. Now, after learning this, most players would probably just let the real Art who's holding the weapon do his deed. Let him take care of the synth who's trying to replace him. But maybe for whatever reason, you just really like chaos. If that's how you feel, you can instead convince the real Art to lower his weapon and just think about things for a while. If you do that, the synthetic Art will then stand up and pull out another weapon of his own, and begin attacking the real one. A firefight will ensue, in which case the synth almost always comes out on top thanks to considerably higher damage resistance within his character's stats. Once the real Art is gone, the synthetic one will thank you for your help, and sometimes even reward you with ammo, and that interaction will be over. So, if you're a sole survivor that just wants to see the world burn, or I guess maybe if you're an Institute sympathizer, then consider this option. Our next and last two spots in this video will be taking us to the island of Acadia in the Far Harbor DLC. For our fourth evil action, we'll be heading into Vault 118, located just beneath the Cliff's Edge Hotel on the island's northern shores. Now, almost every vault we encounter in the Fallout universe is pretty fascinating, but Vault 118 has an especially interesting background. You see, it was developed by Vault-Tec in order to test how a small group of insanely wealthy individuals would handle living in close proximity to a large group of not so wealthy fellows. Two massive wings of the vault were supposed to be built. One ultra-luxurious wing for the rich folks, complete with movie theaters, museums, simulated beaches, a robotic staff of butlers, and even car garages. The other wing for everybody else would contain the more standard Vault-Tec amenities. It didn't take very long before Vault-Tec finished the comfortable rich side of the vault. However, as soon as they did, funding strangely dried up, and they were never able to get around to completing the other half for the more normal and lower class citizens. The result of this was that in the end, when the bombs did fall, that small group of rich folks was still able to find shelter in their prestigious dwellings, with every whim catered to by robots. However, none of the other people could move in, and thus no experiment could really take place. It ultimately just became a really comfortable place to live for the few people who were lucky enough to get in. Sometime into their stay, the wealthy vault dwellers all decided to have their minds converted into robo-brain robots and dispose of their bodies, so they wouldn't have to deal with the effects of old age and could live in luxury forever. This sets the stage for what we walk into when we arrive in Fallout 4. A vault full of robo-brains and robots, all of which are centuries old. Many of these robo-brains are older than you. Wow. But the vault is also going through a bit of turmoil upon our arrival. Just before we got here, one of the robo-brains, a man named Erza Parker, was murdered to death, and nobody's sure who did it. It will be up to the player to solve this mystery. Beginning the quest, Brain Dead. Now, there's a few ways this mission could go. You can reach a deadlock and never find out the truth. You could accidentally accuse the wrong guy and have him turn hostile, forcing you to kill him and finishing the quest without letting you discover what really happened. Or, you could uncover the fascinating truth. If you investigate thoroughly enough, the sole survivor will eventually discover that Erza Parker wasn't ever murdered at all. That dead robo-brain we see is in fact a woman named Juliana, and Erza Parker is still alive, disguising himself as Juliana with a voice changer. Apparently, Erza was secretly embezzling Vault-Tec's money all those years ago when they were first constructing Vault 118. That's why they were never able to finish the lower class wing, because Erza took all the cash. Somehow relatively recently, Juliana, a fellow robo-brain, found out about this and confronted him about it. In a desperate bid to keep her quiet, Erza just killed her. After doing so, in order to avoid suspicion, he simply changed his voice and started pretending that he was Juliana. When people eventually found the dead robo-brain, since all of the bots looked the same, they assumed it was Erza's, as he was the only one missing.
I think you're the real murderer.
That's just silly, Detective. Why would I want to kill Mr. Parker?
Ezra was embezzling your money. That's why you killed him and framed Keith.
You were so close, Detective.
It's a shame. I thought I could keep the ruse going a little longer. Oh, well. Had to end eventually, I suppose.
It's a complicated, hilarious, and genius plot this man concocted all at the same time. After discovering it, you can tell the other robots, and watch as they rip Erza apart in anger, and the quest comes to a completion. Its rightful one. However, it's also possible to confront Erza first, and agree to take a bribe from him. Once he knows you're onto him, Erza will admit everything to you, and inform the player that he's planning on running away immediately. He promises to pay you hundreds of pre-war cash if you agree just not to tell anyone and let him escape. If you agree to all of this, he'll pay you the promised money, and then you could watch as he runs outside of the vault. Afterwards, you're welcome to tell everyone the truth, but at this point, it'll be far too late, and you can tell them, yeah, tried to catch Erza, you weren't able to, too bad he got away. And the quest comes to an end. You can also sort of play both sides if you'd really like to, i.e. agree to take Erza's cash, but as he runs out of the vault, tell everyone, and they'll ambush him before he gets away. This will result in you being allowed to keep the bribe money, and also ensuring that justice is delivered. Whatever the case, despite clearly not possessing a very strong moral compass, I think it's hard not to respect Erza's incredibly hilarious scheme. And I think he's quite possibly my favorite Robo-Brain ever in the Fallout franchise. And finally, last on our list, we're staying on the island. As we've discussed before, the Far Harbor main narrative is dictated by a jockey for power between Acadia's three major factions. The synth colony held up in the old wildlife observatory, the radical Children of Atom chapter buried away deep in an old nuclear submarine station, and the human settlement of Far Harbor. None of these three groups really trusts each other, and ultimately the player will get to forge the island's fate, deciding which group comes out on top, if any. Real angels can also forge an everlasting peace between everyone, but that's not what we're here for. I want to explore what is perhaps the most horrific conclusion this DLC has to offer. You see, when we first get here, the Children of Atom are by far and away the craziest of the groups we can meet. Sure, some of the people on Far Harbor are a bit militant and want to wipe out the other two factions, but in their case it's more of a get them before they get us scenario. And the synths are totally cool with not hurting anyone. It's the Children of Atom, under their new extremist leader, High Confessor Tectus, that are really out for blood. They want to destroy both Far Harbor and Acadia, not for their own self-preservation, but for the sake of letting Adam reclaim what is rightfully his. During the events of the DLC, we are though given an egregious amount of opportunities to keep the children's ambitions at bay. We can get Tectus replaced with a much more level-headed guy, we can just convince them not to be mean, we could side with other factions and destroy the chapter outright, or we could even convince the chapter to blow itself up. All of these cards are on the table. However, if we allow High Confessor Tectus to remain in power, and never make an effort to calm him down and side with the children, the end result we get is pretty horrifying. The Children of Atom will have the player power down Far Harbor's wind turbines, the devices that keep the island's fog, and all of the monsters it brings, at bay. And this results in the settlement's citizens suffering a very grisly fate. Once the turbines are off and the fog rolls in, the Children of Atom's questline ends quite positively. But the next time we visit Far Harbor, we'll hear gunshots as we approach. And when we arrive, the whole place will be burning in chaos, as various creatures overwhelm and slaughter the inhabitants, most of which are totally innocent and peaceful. Some citizens will desperately try to resist, but their efforts will be no match for the onslaught of fog crawlers and gulpers. It's a really gruesome conclusion that frankly reminds me quite a bit of some of the evil opportunities we could explore in previous Fallout games. Some of you will recall the Tenpenny Tower questline of Fallout 3, where we could cause that building's citizens to suffer a similar fate. Nonetheless, this is but a single, twisted, possible conclusion for the people of Far Harbor, and it will be all thanks to the efforts of the sole survivor. And with that, we are going to wrap up 5 more of the most evil choices you're free to make in Fallout 4. Thanks for watching, everyone. Which of these opportunities to explore your sinister side did you find to be the most enticing? And what evil options, or really good ones, should I cover next? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.